Late night at Aspen Ridge. Inside the glass-walled office on the 38th floor, Dr. Leah Mitchell lay still on the leather sofa, pretending to be asleep. Outside, Denver's snow blanketed the city. The office lights above cast a crystalline shimmer across the frosted ground, like shards of broken glass. She wasn't sleeping. She was observing. The night shift janitor, Malcolm Porter, paused at the doorway. Leah cracked her eyelids slightly, watching every movement he made. On the sofa, she curled up, breathing evenly, still clutching a pen. As if even in sleep, she refused to let go of control. Outside, the temperature had dropped to -12 degrees. As always, the building's central air had overdone it again, flooding the corner of the room with cold air. Malcolm stood there silently for a moment. Then, slowly, he removed his old canvas jacket, the only warm thing he owned. Bought second-hand, because most of his wages went toward his daughter's school uniform, and gently draped it over Leah's shoulders. He leaned down, close enough for her to smell the faint mix of soap and sweat from a long shift. His voice was low and rough, like someone holding back something too heavy to say aloud. "I couldn't save my wife, but I won't let anyone else be alone again." Leah's heart stopped for a second. She parted her lips as if to exhale, but stayed still. Those words, spoken not to her, but to the ghost of someone he'd lost, cut through the armor she had built over 7 long years, slicing like silk under a blade. He had lost someone, and just made a vow to the dead, that he would never abandon anyone again. Leah opened her eyes. Their gazes met in the dark. Malcolm jerked back, still holding the edge of the jacket. Neither spoke. Only the soft tapping of snow against glass remained. The sound of 2 heavy breaths, one from someone who had lost too much, and the other from someone terrified of losing more, merged in the frozen air. And in that moment, Leah understood. She had just found the only person in this building she could trust, and perhaps the one she should fear most. This is the story of 2 strangers, divided by class, bound by unspoken grief. One arrived 90 minutes too late, the other 1 minute, and neither had ever forgiven themselves. But tonight, in the glass tower of Denver, one whispered promise would change everything. Because sometimes, trust isn't built on power, but on an old jacket, and a promise no one asked for. 7 years ago, Leah Mitchell, then only 27, was sitting in a boardroom in New York, right in the middle of negotiating a $47 million logistics contract. Her phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. She glanced at the screen. Seattle General Hospital. Leah pressed silent, then flipped the phone face down on the table. Just 5 more minutes, she told herself. 5 minutes, then I'm done. But 5 became 10. 10 became 20. When the meeting finally ended, Leah rushed to the airport and caught the first direct flight to Seattle. 3.5 hours. Then another 40 minutes by taxi from the airport to the hospital. When she burst into the hospital room, lungs burning, the room was already empty. The bed was neatly made. The machines were off. The smell of disinfectant still hung in the air. An older nurse stood by the doorway, her eyes tired yet gentle. "She called your name," the nurse said softly. Until the very last moment, she kept asking, "Where's my daughter? Has she come yet?" Leah sank to her knees on the floor. No tears, no screams, just knelt there, staring at the empty bed, trying to picture her mother's face. But in her mind, there were only numbers. $47 million. 90 minutes. The price of a life. 3 years ago, Malcolm Porter was working the night shift at an Air Force base outside Denver, fixing aircraft engines. Mid-shift, his phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor. "There's smoke coming from your house." I called 911. Malcolm threw down his tools, jumped into his truck, and sped through the snow-covered streets. But a red light stopped him. 60 seconds. He didn't know then that those 60 seconds would define the rest of his life. By the time he reached home, flames had swallowed the small house whole. Fire trucks lined the street. Neighbors huddled together, hands clasped, faces pale with horror. A firefighter rushed up and shouted, "Was anyone inside?" Malcolm didn't answer. He just stood there, eyes locked on the inferno, where his wife, Vivian, was asleep after her hospital shift. 3 minutes later, firefighters carried out a woman's body. Her face was already blue. Vivian, nurse, wife, and mother of 5-year-old Zoe, had died of smoke inhalation. The smoke alarm had failed. Its battery, one Malcolm had meant to replace 2 weeks earlier, had died. But he kept postponing it because the paycheck had to cover tuition and milk. $2.99. 1 minute. The price of a life. 3 years later, Malcolm worked as a night janitor at the Aspen Ridge headquarters. Not because he wasn't capable. He had once been one of the top technicians on base, but because he needed the night shift. Night shift meant he worked while his daughter slept. Night shift meant he was home every morning when she woke up. Night shift meant he would never leave his daughter alone again. Every evening, Zoe went with him to the tower. She stayed in the security room where old Frank, the night guard, had set up a small corner of the desk just for her drawings. Zoe drew snow-capped mountains. She drew sunlight breaking through clouds. She drew tiny yellow lights glowing in the night. She didn't know she was drawing the things her father could no longer give her. Warmth, light, and the feeling of safety. Frank, 62, with salt and pepper mustache and a voice deep as oak, sometimes glanced over and smiled. "Why don't you ever draw people?" he asked one night, his tone gentle. Zoe looked up, her big round eyes clear as a spring lake. "If I draw people, I'd have to draw Mom." "But I don't remember her face anymore, Uncle Frank." Frank swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say. And on the 38th floor, Dr. Leah Mitchell didn't draw people either. She drew charts. She drew strategies. She drew her climb upward in lines and numbers and control. Because if she ever drew people, she'd have to draw her mother. And she couldn't bear it. Aspen Ridge headquarters rose 43 stories high in the heart of Denver, where the plateau touched the sky. A tower of glass and steel, cold and austere, reflecting moonlight and snow like a frozen monolith. By day, it was the leading logistics hub of the West, where hundreds raced against deadlines, targets, and ambition. But at night, only 3 souls remained. Frank, the old guard, sat on the ground floor, reading a worn novel, glancing at the security screens from time to time. Zoe, the 8-year-old, drew dreams she never dared to speak aloud. And Malcolm Porter, the 35-year-old man with broad shoulders, calloused hands, and tired eyes, pushed his cleaning cart through silent hallways. He didn't work like a janitor. He moved like a soldier patrolling a battlefield, afraid that if he missed a single detail, someone might die. On the 40th floor, Dr. Leah Mitchell sat alone, gazing down at the snow-covered city, sipping her 5th cup of coffee of the day, counting each breath. 7 seconds in, 7 seconds out, just as her mother once taught her, before everything collapsed. But tonight would be different, because tonight, Leah Mitchell had decided to test someone's heart, and Malcolm Porter would speak a vow he never imagined anyone would hear. An old jacket, a whispered sentence, and everything would begin to change. If you've ever faced that moment when you had to choose between your job and the person you love, between being on time and being true, then you'll understand why a single minute or one press of silent can change an entire life. Subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapter, when Leah's experiment begins and Malcolm's vow becomes something no one could have foreseen. That morning, Leah sat in the conference room with Ethan Hollis, the chief financial officer, a white man with slicked-back hair and a navy suit that always seemed less like clothing and more like armor against uncomfortable questions. 72 hours from now, the audit team from Cascade Holdings will arrive. Ethan's voice was calm, almost gentle, but beneath it ran a tension stretched tight as wire. Everything has to be perfect. Our ESG report shows an 18% reduction in carbon emissions over the past 6 months. Impressive, isn't it? Leah nodded, but a small, restless itch stirred inside her. Too perfect. She'd learned one thing in business. When numbers looked flawless, someone was probably hiding something. But she didn't say that aloud. She simply watched Ethan, trying to read his face. But it was useless. He was the kind of man who could lie to an entire boardroom and still make everyone believe he cared. When the meeting ended, Leah stood by the window and looked down at the ground floor. From up here, she could see Malcolm pushing a trash cart outside. His jacket was paper-thin, his breath visible in the 10-below-zero air. The door opened behind her. Renee Johnson, head of human resources, a Latina woman with cropped curls and eyes sharp as blades, stepped inside. "He's never late," Renee said, her gaze following Malcolm through the glass. "Never complains, never asked for a day off. I checked his record. 3 years, not a single absence." Leah turned around, raising an eyebrow. "Why are you telling me this?" Renee smiled faintly. "Because I know what you're thinking. You want to know who in this building you can trust. And I'm telling you, it's him." Leah narrowed her eyes. "And how can you be sure?" "Because I've worked in HR for 11 years, Renee said, her voice low and certain. "I've seen every kind of person. The dishonest always look for excuses. The lazy always find ways to disappear. But the honest ones? They just work. Quietly. Consistently. They don't need anyone's praise." Leah said nothing. Her eyes drifted back to the glass, to where Malcolm bent down to pick up a trash bag blown loose by the wind. A moment later, she murmured, "I need to test that." That night, at 9:47 p.m., Leah entered the conference room on the 38th floor. She rearranged the merger files, deliberately scattering them across the table. Then she placed her handbag next to the sofa, leaving the zipper slightly open, enough to reveal the edge of a $100 bill and a few credit cards. Then she lay down, steadying her breathing. Slow. Even. Outside the glass wall, snow began to fall, soft as feathers, drifting slowly, blanketing the city of Denver in a deep, echoing silence. Leah closed her eyes. 7 seconds in, 7 seconds out. A meditation. A test. The sound of wheels against the floor echoed faintly. Distant at first, then closer, then stopping. She could feel someone at the door. A presence. Silent. Watching. "Oh, God." Malcolm's voice was barely a whisper, soft enough that Leah heard it only because of the absolute stillness of the room. He stepped inside. The faint squeak of rubber soles moved slowly across the polished floor. He wiped down the glass table, checked the power outlets, straightened the carpet. Each task careful, precise. Then he stopped and looked toward her. Leah felt that gaze. Not curious, not intrusive, but filled with the quiet concern of someone who had seen too many people collapse from exhaustion. His eyes shifted to her half-open bag. The money. The cards. He bent down and gently pulled the zipper shut, all the way. Then he did something Leah didn't expect. He took off his old canvas jacket, the only one he owned, bought second-hand for $9, and draped it softly over her shoulders. Warmth spread, the faint scent of cheap ivory soap, the honest sweat of a man who worked 12-hour shifts, the smell of a father holding up the weight of the world just so his little girl could sleep safely. Malcolm leaned down, close enough that his breath brushed her cheek. His voice trembled, as if he were speaking to someone no longer alive. "I couldn't save my wife, but I won't let anyone else be alone again. I promise." The words were hoarse, breaking, like a man fighting back tears. Leah's heart nearly stopped. Leah opened her eyes, not the slow, hazy blink of someone just waking up, but a sudden, electric jolt, as if a current had shot through her entire body. Her pupils contracted in the dim light. Her heartbeat raced out of rhythm. Malcolm froze. He stepped back, one hand still lifted in the air, as though he had just touched something sacred, something he had no right to touch. They stared at each other. Neither spoke. Only the soft tapping of snow against the glass broke the silence, the faint hiss of the air conditioner, and the sound of two uneven breaths, one from someone who had lost too much, and one from someone terrified of losing more. Leah slowly sat up. The jacket slid off her shoulders. She caught it in her hands, feeling the warmth that still lingered, tracing the worn but carefully cleaned fabric. She could smell the ivory soap, $3 a bar, and something else. Something money couldn't buy. Kindness. "Thank you," Leah said. Her voice sounded steadier than she expected, though her hands were trembling slightly. Malcolm nodded, his face returning to the neutral calm of a man long accustomed to working in silence. "Sorry for waking you, ma'am. I'll just finish up and get out of your way." But Leah wasn't thinking about the cleaning. In her head, his whispered words replayed, words that had cut straight through the armor she had built over 7 long years, slicing through her composure, like silk beneath a blade. "I couldn't save my wife." The weight of that sentence, the way he had said it, naturally, sincerely, never meant for anyone to hear. She knew those words weren't for her. He'd been speaking to someone who was no longer here, and she understood. She knew that feeling, that unbearable ache of losing someone just because you weren't there when it mattered most. Leah wanted to ask. She wanted to know who the woman was, what had happened, and why this man still carried grief like a second heartbeat. But she didn't, because she understood there are wounds that shatter the moment you touch them. She simply nodded. "Go ahead and finish your work. I won't get in the way." Malcolm turned back to his tasks. But something in the room had changed. It was as if something invisible had just passed between them. A secret that needed no words. He wiped the table, checked the outlets, vacuumed every corner. Each movement slow, deliberate, precise, as if he were assembling an aircraft engine rather than cleaning a boardroom. And Leah watched. Not pretending this time. Really watching. She noticed how he tested each power socket, making sure no wires were loose. How he adjusted the edge of the carpet so no one would trip. How he zipped her handbag closed, protecting someone else's belongings as if it were his duty. He wasn't just cleaning. He was protecting. When Malcolm pushed the cart toward the door, Leah called after him. "What's your name?" He stopped, turned around. "Malcolm Porter, ma'am," Leah repeated softly, almost like engraving the name into memory. "Malcolm." Thank you. Truly, he gave a small nod, barely more than a gesture, then disappeared into the dim hallway, his silhouette swallowed by the hum of fluorescent light. Leah remained alone in the boardroom, the jacket still in her hands. She didn't put it on, she simply held it, as if it were a clue, a question with no answer yet. She pulled out her phone, opened the HR system, and typed, Malcolm Porter. The file appeared. Name, Malcolm Porter. Age, 35. Position, night shift custodian. Background, former aircraft technician, Buckley Air Force Base. Marital status, widowed, Vivian Porter. Deceased, 2022. Child, Zoe Porter, 8 years old. Hourly wage, $18.5. Employment duration, 3 years. Perfect attendance, 0 absences, 0 complaints, 0 commendations. Leah stopped at the last line. No commendations. 3 flawless years of work, and not a single person had ever noticed. Because who praises the janitor? She scrolled down to the notes section and read the comment written by Renee Johnson 6 months ago. This employee requested a transfer from day shift to night shift due to family reasons. He did not provide further details. I approved it, because I believe he has a good reason. Leah stared at the words. Renee had been right. Honest people don't need to talk much. They just live in a way that makes others believe. She turned off her phone and looked out the window. The snow was falling harder now. Denver was blanketed white, as if the whole city were being washed clean, given another chance. And Leah realized she needed one too. She gripped the jacket tighter and made a decision. Tomorrow morning, she would call Malcolm Porter to her office, not to fire him, not to praise him, but to ask a single question, one she hadn't dared to ask anyone for the past 7 years. Do you trust me? The next morning, 7:15 a.m. Malcolm Porter stood outside the office on the 40th floor, holding his old knitted cap in his hands. His palms were slick with sweat. He had never set foot on this floor except to clean it. The 40th floor was for people in suits, not for men in navy blue janitor uniforms. Mr. Porter, Dr. Mitchell is expecting you, said Clara, the assistant. Her smile was polite, but her eyes betrayed curiosity. Malcolm nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. Leah's office was wide and open, with 3 glass walls facing the snow-covered Rocky Mountains. Morning light flooded the room, bright, pristine, yet somehow cold. The kind of light that belonged to winter mornings 1 mile above sea level. Please, sit down, Mr. Porter, Leah said, holding her 3rd cup of coffee that morning. Malcolm sat opposite her, back straight, hands resting neatly on his thighs, like a soldier awaiting orders. Last night, Leah began calmly, you covered me with your jacket. Why? Malcolm looked up. Because it was cold, ma'am. You weren't afraid of losing your job for touching a sleeping CEO? He paused for a moment, then spoke slowly. I was afraid. But when you see someone shivering, you don't just walk away. Leah nodded. That was exactly the answer she had wanted. Not, I thought you wouldn't notice, but I couldn't ignore it. Not strategy. Principle. Leah stood and walked toward the window. Light reflected sharply across her face, cold and defined. 72 hours from now, the audit team from Cascade Holdings will arrive, she said firmly. I need someone to inspect the entire building's safety systems, electrical, mechanical, fire alarms, emergency exits. I want a detailed report. No omissions, not a single fault overlooked. She turned back, locking eyes with him. I want you to handle it. Malcolm froze. Ma'am, I'm not an inspector. You were an aircraft technician, Leah interrupted. You maintained jet engines and hydraulic systems. I read your file. You move through this building more than anyone else. You notice things others miss. Loose wires, uneven carpets, faulty outlets. I need that kind of eye, Malcolm replied carefully. But I don't have certification. I don't need certification, Leah said, setting her coffee cup down. I need someone who can spot a problem before it becomes a disaster. Her voice was steady, decisive. 48 hours. Report directly to me. No one else. Can you do that? Malcolm met her gaze, and in her eyes he saw something familiar. Fear, buried beneath composure and control. She wasn't giving an order. She was asking for help. I can do it, he said firmly. But one thing must be clear. If I find something truly wrong, something that could jeopardize the merger, do you still want to know? Leah went silent. She turned back toward the mountains, white peaks where ice hid both truth and lies. Then she spoke, softly but resolutely. I want the truth. Whatever it is, Malcolm nodded. Then I'll find it. As he stood to leave, Leah asked quietly, Why did you leave your job as an aircraft technician? He paused. Because I needed the night shift. Night shift means I'm home with my daughter during the day. It means she's never alone. How old is your daughter? 8. Her name's Zoe. Leah nodded gently. She understood that feeling, the ache of a child left behind, and the adult who carries that wound forever. You're a good father, she said. Malcolm didn't smile. He simply nodded once, then turned to leave. When the door closed behind him, Leah exhaled slowly. She had just entrusted her confidence and the future of 800 employees to a man she'd spoken to for the first time that morning. But there was something in the words, I couldn't ignore it, that made her believe. If there was anyone brave enough to tell the truth, no matter the cost, it would be Malcolm Porter. Outside, Renee Johnson saw Malcolm leaving the office. She opened her computer and typed a note into his HR profile. Special assignment from the CEO. Monitor progress. Reason. He's about to uncover something important. And sometimes, Leah thought, the best thing HR can do isn't to hire the right person, but to trust that the right person is already there. That night, 9:15 p.m., Malcolm Porter and his 8-year-old daughter Zoe entered the Aspen Ridge building. Zoe wore a puffy purple coat, clutching a box of colored pencils and her sketchbook in her small hands. Her cheeks glowed pink from the razor-cold wind outside. Daddy's going to be a little busier tonight, sweetheart, Malcolm said, bending down so their eyes met. You'll sit with Mr. Frank and draw, okay? I'll come check on you every hour. Zoe nodded, her brown eyes lighting up. I'll draw the snowy mountains. That sounds perfect. Now, give Daddy a kiss. The little girl kissed his cheek, then ran toward the security office on the ground floor, where Frank, the elderly night guard, had already cleared a small corner of his desk for her, with a warm yellow lamp and a cup of hot chocolate waiting. Malcolm stood watching her for a while. His chest tightened. An 8-year-old shouldn't have to sit in a security office until midnight. But he had no other choice. No grandparents, no sitter, just him and his daughter, leaning on each other in a world too vast and too cold. He took a deep breath, pushed the ache down, and got to work. Tonight, Malcolm didn't move like a janitor. He worked like a technician, systematic, methodical, checking each detail with the same precision he once used while maintaining aircraft engines. He started in the basement, where the building's main electrical and backup generator systems were housed. The air was heavy with the scent of machine oil. The low hum of engines filled the concrete chamber. Malcolm opened the control panel, comparing each floor's energy output against the official consumption log. Floors 1 to 10, normal. Floor 11, normal. Floor 12. He stopped. The system log marked floor 12 as under renovation, inactive. but the energy consumption showed 17 kilowatts. At 11 p.m., no one was supposed to be there, yet the power was running. Malcolm noted it carefully, snapping a photo of the screen. Then he moved on to inspect the backup generator system, and found another irregularity. The voltage readings fluctuated constantly, but in the official reports, the data had been smoothed out. Too smooth, too perfect, as if someone had manually edited the numbers. The second night, Malcolm brought Zoe down to the basement with him. The little girl sat on the cold concrete floor while he laid his jacket beneath her like a makeshift cushion. Zoe opened her sketchbook, colored pencils ready. "What are you doing, Daddy?" she asked, tilting her head up, curious. "I'm checking to make sure everything's safe," Malcolm answered, still bent over the control panel. "Like when I used to check airplanes." "So nobody gets hurt?" Malcolm looked up. The fluorescent light cast a pale glow over her small face, her clear eyes reflecting his own image back at him. "That's right, sweetheart," he said softly. "So nobody gets hurt." Zoe nodded and returned to her drawing. She sketched the control panel in front of them. Rows of switches, indicator lights, and digital readouts. She drew with surprising precision, her small hands capturing details no adult would have thought to notice. Meanwhile, Malcolm kept working. He opened a junction box in the corner of the engine room and found freshly soldered joints. The firmware update label read 3 weeks ago. Signed by an admin account not listed among the official maintenance staff. Someone had tampered with the system. From the inside. Someone with high-level access. Malcolm photographed it, logged the serial numbers, and marked the location. Each piece of evidence small on its own, but together they carried the weight of something enormous. An hour later, as Malcolm was packing up his tools, Zoe tugged gently at his sleeve. "Daddy, why does that light keep blinking?" "The other ones don't." Malcolm turned around. Zoe held up her drawing. On the paper, she had recreated the entire control board, meticulously detailed. And in the lower corner, a small red indicator light pulsed rhythmically. He looked up at the real panel. She was right. A faint red light, almost invisible to the naked eye, was blinking steadily in the corner. Malcolm flipped open his old technical manual. That light only appeared when the loop simulation circuit was active, meaning the system was feeding false data into the monitoring network. He stared at Zoe. Zoe, 8 years old, knowing nothing about electricity, systems, or fraud, had just pointed out the single most important clue in the entire investigation. Malcolm pulled her into his arms. "You're so smart, Zoe," he whispered. "Daddy's so proud of you." Zoe giggled, not understanding why her father's voice trembled, but wrapped her small arms around his neck anyway. And in that moment, Malcolm realized, sometimes the truth isn't uncovered by the experts hardened by experience, but by the clear, unclouded eyes of a child who simply draws what she sees, not what adults want to believe. The next morning, 7:15 a.m. Leah slipped her leather wallet into her handbag, deliberately leaving the zipper slightly open, then accidentally forgot it on the stone bench in the ground floor lobby, right along the route Malcolm would take at 11 p.m. Inside the wallet were 5 $100 bills, 3 credit cards, and her driver's license, a total of over $500 in cash. Enough to change the life of a man earning $18.50 an hour. Leah sat in her office on the 40th floor, eyes fixed on the security feed. Not because she suspected Malcolm, but because she needed to know one thing for certain. When no one was watching, would he still be the man he seemed to be? 11:37 p.m. Malcolm appeared on the screen. He stopped in front of the bench, glanced down at the wallet, looked around. No one there. He picked it up, opened it, checking for any ID. Leah held her breath. Malcolm saw the cash. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Then he closed the wallet, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and walked straight to the security office. "Frank, I just found Dr. Mitchell's wallet," he said calmly. "Can you be my witness?" 11:37 p.m. Main lobby bench. "I'll return it to her tomorrow morning." Frank nodded, logged the incident in the shift record, and signed as witness. Malcolm carefully locked the wallet in his personal locker, took a photo of the logbook entry, and went back to work. Leah exhaled slowly and turned off the screen. Not surprised, but relieved. He wasn't just honest. He was careful. Wise enough to protect himself with procedure, so no one could ever accuse him falsely. That wasn't naivete. That was intelligence. And principle. The next morning, 6:05 a.m., Malcolm knocked on Leah's office door, right at the start of his shift. He placed the wallet on her desk, along with a handwritten note. Found at 11:37 p.m. last night. Location: main lobby bench. Witness: Frank Morrison, night guard. Contents intact: 5 $100 bills, 3 credit cards, driver's license. Signed statement attached. Leah looked up at him. "You could have kept a little." As a finder's fee, Malcolm shook his head. "It's not mine, ma'am." "But without you, I would have lost it." "What isn't mine shouldn't stay with me, ma'am." Leah nodded slowly. He had just passed the first test. But she still had another one waiting. That afternoon, 5:30 p.m., Leah sent a sudden message. "Need immediate power load check on floor 22. Report before 7 p.m. Urgent." She knew Malcolm picked up Zoe from school at 6. She wanted to see what he would choose. Work or family. 5:42 p.m., her phone buzzed. "Dr. Mitchell, I'll pick up my daughter at 6 and return by 6:45. Report ready by 7:30. I'm sorry I can't meet the exact deadline, but I can't leave my child waiting." Leah read the message carefully. No excuses. No empty promises. Just truth. "I'll put my daughter first, but I'll still get it done 6:45 p.m. Malcolm was back at the building. Zoe sat in the security office doing homework under the warm glow of a desk lamp. 7:28 p.m. The report arrived. Complete. Accurate. On time. Leah read it and replied, "Thank you. You keep your word." A minute later, Malcolm's message came. "I couldn't keep my word to my wife, but I'll keep it to my daughter." "And to you." Dr. Leah stared at the words for a long time. He wasn't perfect, but he was honest about his imperfections, and he always did what he said he would. Sometimes that was enough. Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. Malcolm appeared at Leah's office door, holding a thick folder. He set it on her desk without a word, stood upright, serious, like a soldier delivering a mission report. Leah opened it. Inside were 47 pages of documentation, photos of control panels, power consumption charts, firmware update timelines, and digital signatures from an admin account that didn't match the official staff list. And at the end, a single, chilling conclusion. The building's energy system has been altered to generate falsified reports. Actual power consumption is 18% higher than reported. Firmware updated 6 months ago, exactly when merger negotiations began. If an independent audit reviews the data, the entire deal could collapse. Leah's face drained of color. "Does anyone else know about this?" "No, ma'am. You said to report only to you." "Good. Keep it that way." She looked up, really looked at him. The man standing before her had just handed her a live grenade with the pin pulled. He could have hidden it. He could have sold it. But he brought it straight to her. "Why tell me?" she asked quietly. "You know this could destroy the merger? It could cost you your job." Malcolm met her eyes, his voice steady, low, resolute. "Because someone needed to know. And because you asked." Leah sat alone in her office, Malcolm's report spread open across her desk. Outside, the snow was falling hard. Denver lay buried under white silence, so still it felt almost alive. She held a coffee cup gone cold hours ago and took a bitter sip. $340 million. 800 employees. The entire future of the company she had spent her youth building. All of it now hinged on one decision in the next 48 hours. She could bury Malcolm's report, push the merger through smoothly, and fix it later. No one would know. Malcolm certainly wouldn't speak if she told him not to. He was a man of his word. But Leah closed her eyes, and memory came crashing back like a cold wave rolling backward through time. 7 years earlier, Seattle General Hospital, white, sterile hallways, the stench of disinfectant, the sharp clack of heels on marble floors. Room 412. Leah ran, breath ragged, lungs burning. The room was empty, the bed made, the machines silent. Her mother was gone. The elderly nurse placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "She called your name until the end," the nurse whispered. "She kept asking, 'Where's my daughter?'" "Did she make it?" Leah sank to the cold floor. No tears, no screaming, just sat there, staring at the empty bed, trying to hold on to her mother's face in her mind. But the only image that appeared was something else. Slide 47 of a PowerPoint presentation. Projected revenue growth. $47 million. 90 minutes. One contract. One life. And the worst part, she had made the right choice. By business logic, that contract had saved the company, saved 200 jobs. But her mother had died alone. And no number, no matter how large, had ever filled the hollow in Leah's chest since that day. Leah's eyes snapped open, her breath shaking. Cold sweat trickled down her spine. On the desk, Malcolm's report remained open. The numbers, the evidence, the choice. If she buried this, she would be walking the same path she took 7 years ago, choosing profit over truth. But this time, she couldn't blame youth, or ambition, or pressure. This time, she knew exactly what she was doing. Her phone vibrated. Caller ID, Ethan Hollis. She answered. "Leah, I heard you've been running some extra checks?" Ethan's voice was soft, almost friendly, but beneath it coiled a thread of tension. "Just making sure everything's in order, Ethan." "Of course. But you know, if there are a few discrepancies, it's better to handle them after the merger. No need to alarm the buyers over a few paperwork quirks," Leah repeated flatly. "Discrepancies?" Ethan chuckled lightly. "You know how systems work, Leah. There's always a little lag between data and reality. Nothing major, but if you dig too deep, you'll always find something. The real question is, what serves the greater good? A flawless audit, or a successful deal that keeps 800 people employed?" Leah said nothing. That was the kind of reasoning people used to sleep well at night. The kind that renamed cowardice business pragmatism. "I'll think about it," she said dryly. "Of course. Just remember, Leah, we're on the same team." The call ended. The same team. Number. They had never been on the same team. That evening, Omar Davis, co-founder of Aspen Ridge, invited Leah to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. Soft jazz floated through the air, candlelight shimmered against crystal, and the faint scent of wine mixed with the perfume of polite deceit. Omar, a 38-year-old black man with an easy, charming smile and a perfectly tailored suit, poured her wine, his confidence radiating the practiced ease of someone who thrived in moral gray zones. "Leah," he said smoothly, "you're the smartest person I've ever worked with. You know how this game is played." "What game?" "The grown-up one," he smiled, a deep, resonant voice coated in reason. "The game where we weigh risks and rewards, where we understand that perfection can sometimes be the enemy of progress." He leaned closer, lowering his tone. "If you dig deep enough, you'll always find something wrong. But the real question is, what serves the greater good? A perfect audit or a successful merger that keeps 800 families safe?" Leah met his eyes, her gaze sharp as ice. "And what if that small problem burns the building down? What if someone dies?" Omar smiled, a smile of lips, not eyes. "Leah, you're being dramatic." "No," she said, standing, placing her napkin neatly on the table. "I'm being realistic." She gave a faint, almost polite smile. "Thank you for dinner, but I'm not hungry." That night, Leah received an email from Renee. No subject line, just one attachment. She opened it. An image of an invoice. Energy Systems Optimization Consulting. $85,000, billed to a shell company owned by Ethan Hollis's cousin. Date: 3 weeks before the firmware alteration. And one single line from Renee. "I thought you should see this." Leah stared at the screen. No doubt remained. This wasn't a technical error. This was deliberate fraud. She grabbed her phone and texted Malcolm. "Prepare to restore the system to factory settings. Back up all data. Record timestamps, check sums, and seal everything. We follow the truth." Seconds later, Malcolm replied, "Understood." Leah leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. For the first time in 7 years, her heart felt lighter. Not because the road ahead would be easy, but because, finally, she was choosing right. That night, 10:45 p.m., Malcolm Porter and a trusted security technician, a young man named David, arranged by Renee, were working in the server room deep in the basement. The main lights were off. Only the cold blue glow of monitors lit their faces, with the occasional flicker of a flashlight across dense webs of wiring. "How much time do we have?" David asked, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Until 6 a.m., Malcolm replied, without looking up from the circuit board. "Before the day shift starts." David nodded, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm backing up the entire server log. SHA-256 encryption, time-stamped from an independent server. If anyone tampers with it later, we'll know." Malcolm photographed every replaced solder joint, every reattached firmware label, every wire the wrong color. He worked like he used to on aircraft engines, meticulous, precise, zero tolerance for error. Because he knew one overlooked detail could be the difference between life and death. "All done," David murmured, eyes bright in the glow of the screen. "With this, we could take it straight to court." "You ever work for the FBI?" Malcolm smiled faintly, shook his head. "I don't work for the FBI. I work for the truth." On the 40th floor, Leah and Renee sat across from each other, a massive whiteboard between them. They were mapping out a 3-step plan. "Step 1, Leah began calmly. "Malcolm restores the system to factory settings. That'll make the real energy data show up on the live monitoring feed. Step 2, Renee continued, "we install a digital tripwire, a hidden token in the code. If anyone tries to access the compromised zone, the system logs everything: IP address, user ID, exact timestamp. Leah nodded, writing as she spoke. Step 3. I'll call Ethan and Omar in for a meeting. We record it. Colorado's a one-party consent state. We let them incriminate themselves. And then, she took a deep breath, we present the full evidence to the audit team. Renee studied her, admiration and worry mixing in her gaze. You know this could end your career, right? The board could blame you for lack of oversight. Leah gave a small, quiet smile, her tone low but firm. I know. But if I don't do this, I won't be able to look at myself in the mirror. She thought of her mother, of those 90 minutes too late, of every time she'd chosen the wrong thing for the right reasons. This time, she said, I'll choose right. The next morning, Malcolm completed the final task, predicting when the saboteur would return. He studied the blinking pattern of the red light, the same one Zoe had drawn days earlier. Cycle, 73 minutes. Not random. 73 minutes avoided overlap with security patrols and cleaning shift rotations. He pulled up the access history logs. Each unauthorized intrusion had occurred around 11:15 p.m. After office staff had gone home, but before the night janitors reached the upper floors. He texted Leah. Tomorrow night, 11:15. They'll come back, right before the audit's final review. Objective. Make one last data edit so the numbers look perfect. Leah read the message and replied briefly. We'll be ready. But her hand trembled slightly as she set the phone down. Not from fear of confrontation, but from the risk she was taking, betting $340 million and 800 lives on a janitor she'd truly known for only 3 days. That night, Malcolm didn't bring Zoe. He left her with Mrs. Garcia, the kindly old neighbor who always kept hot chocolate waiting for her. Where are you going, Daddy? Zoe asked, clutching her worn-out teddy bear. Malcolm knelt, meeting her innocent eyes. I have something important to do tonight, sweetheart. Something that, if Mommy were here, she'd be proud of. Is it dangerous? He hesitated a moment, then shook his head softly, voice low and steady. Maybe. But I have to do it, because it's the right thing. Zoe nodded seriously, like a little grown-up. Mom always said, do the right thing, no matter how hard it is. Malcolm smiled, pulling her close. That's right, baby. She did. He kissed her forehead, then drove off into the frozen night, toward Aspen Ridge. In his jacket pocket, a mini fire extinguisher, a respirator mask, a high-powered flashlight, and in his heart, a whispered promise to the woman he'd lost. Vivian, I won't let anyone die tonight. I promise. 10:30 p.m. Security control room, 40th floor. Leah stood beside Renee and David. In front of them, 3 monitors, one showing the camera feed from floor 12, one tracking power distribution, and one logging real-time access attempts. If they come back, David said, fingers hovering above the keyboard, the tripwire will trigger instantly. No way to hide it. Leah nodded, gripping her 7th cup of coffee that day. Her heartbeat quickened, not from caffeine, but from a strange, electric intuition. Tonight would change everything. Down in the basement, Malcolm stood beside the main control panel, radio in his ear, eyes on the blinking readouts. Signal check, Leah's voice came through his headset. Loud and clear, Malcolm replied, calm and grounded. I'm ready. The clock ticked. 11 o'clock, 11:10, 11:14. Then, on the floor, 12 camera feed, a shadow appeared at the hallway entrance. Dressed in black, hooded, moving fast, efficient, like someone who had done this before. Renee whispered, They're here. Leah tightened her grip on the microphone, her voice low, steady, every word deliberate. Malcolm. Showtime. And in that instant, the line between janitor and hero vanished, reduced to a single press of a button. That night, for the first time, Aspen Ridge was about to be lit by the truth. 11:16 p.m. The fire alarm screamed from the 12th floor, shrill, piercing, slicing through the night like a blade. Malcolm was in the basement when he heard it. Not a false alarm. Real fire. Acrid smoke snaked through the vents, stinging his lungs. "Leah!" he shouted into the radio. "It's real! Fire on 12! I'm heading up!" Leah's voice crackled back, urgent. "Malcolm, wait for the firefighters!" But he didn't wait. He grabbed a fire extinguisher, pulled on a respirator mask, and sprinted up the steel staircase, each footstep echoing like thunder through the blaring alarm. From the surveillance screens on the 40th floor, Leah saw thick black smoke billowing from the electrical room on 12. A lone figure, Omar Davis, was inside, frantically trying to dismantle an illegally wired voltage regulator. David shouted, "He's trying to destroy the evidence!" But the circuits overloaded. The transformers about to blow. Leah's command was instant. "Evacuate the building. Now." The emergency alarms roared through all 43 floors. Night shift workers, around 30 in total, poured into the stairwells in panic. But while everyone ran down, one man ran up. Malcolm Porter, running straight into the fire. The 12th floor was a choking cloud of smoke. Heat rose fast. The walls themselves seemed to breathe. Malcolm flicked on his flashlight. A thin yellow beam cut through the suffocating haze. "Anybody here?" he shouted. A faint cough answered, somewhere ahead. He ran toward it, the electrical room. Omar Davis lay slumped beside the breaker cabinet, still clutching a screwdriver, face pale and slick with sweat. Flames had spread from the transformer to the file cabinet, then to the carpet. Omar looked up, terrified when he saw Malcolm. "Porter, help me!" Malcolm froze. 1 second. Just one. Before him was the man whose greed and deceit had nearly destroyed the lives of 800 people. But through the smoke, another image flashed in Malcolm's mind. 3 years earlier, a small house on the outskirts of Denver. Fire devouring everything, the photos, the walls, the woman he loved. Malcolm tried to rush in, but firefighters held him back. "You can't go in there. It's too dangerous. My wife's still inside." "We'll get her. Stay here." 3 minutes later, just 3 minutes, they carried Vivian out. Her face was purple, her body still. Malcolm fell to his knees in the snow, cradling her, screaming into the cold night. "1 minute, Vivian! Just 1 more minute. Why couldn't you wait for me?" But smoke doesn't wait. Death doesn't wait. That night, at her grave, under the October rain and the howl of the wind, Malcolm made a vow. "I will never let anyone die alone again, no matter who they are." Back to the present. Malcolm looked at Omar, the man trembling before him, face ashen, eyes wide with terror. He spoke softly, voice hoarse and steady. "I don't owe you anything." Omar's eyes welled with tears through the haze. "I know." Malcolm took a deep breath, his eyes glowing faintly through the smoke. "But I owe myself. I owe my wife. I owe the promise I made." He bent down, hauled Omar up, and slung him over his shoulder. Behind them, the flames roared to life. The main exit was blocked. The stairwell was engulfed in smoke. The temperature spiked by the second. "We're dead," Omar gasped. "Not yet." Malcolm scanned the room. To the right, an auxiliary maintenance door leading to the storage level below. The electronic lock had lost power. He set Omar down, pulled an industrial nylon rope from his tool belt, the kind he used for window cleaning on high floors. Looped it tight around the door handle. Hold on to me. One kick. Didn't budge. Second kick. Still nothing. Third, the door burst open. They stumbled down the dark stairwell, chased by smoke like a living beast. Heat seared their skin. Firelight danced on the walls like the gates of hell thrown wide. At the bottom, a flood of white light cut through the darkness. And through the haze, Leah Mitchell. A wet scarf tied over her face, eyes red from smoke. Her voice cracked but strong. "Hurry!" Malcolm dragged Omar out. All three collapsed onto the 11th floor hallway, coughing violently, drenched in sweat. Outside, sirens wailed, fire engines closing in. Leah dropped to her knees beside Malcolm, trembling hands on his shoulder. "Are you hurt?" Malcolm pulled off his mask, gasping for air, his voice rasping. "I'm fine." He turned to Omar, the man who had nearly burned down the building, now trembling, eyes bloodshot. Malcolm said slowly, firmly, "You owe me your life. And you'll pay it. With the truth." Omar bowed his head, tears cutting lines through the soot. I'll tell everything." In the basement, police and security had already taken Ethan Hollis into custody. Inside his vest pocket, a USB drive containing access logs that perfectly matched the compromised system. David, the young security tech, had called in the investigators just in time. They brought in an independent electrical engineer who confirmed that every piece of evidence was time-stamped, verified, and tamper-proof. The scheme collapsed. Everything laid bare. Leah stood silently, watching as Ethan was led away in handcuffs. She felt no triumph, only a deep, quiet release, the kind that seeps into your bones. She had chosen the truth, and truth, however costly, was the only thing that allowed her to look in the mirror without lowering her eyes. The next morning, 8 a.m. sharp. The boardroom on the 42nd floor was silent as a tomb. Around the long oak table sat 12 board members, 4 representatives from Cascade Holdings, 2 attorneys, 1 fire marshal, and 1 independent electrical engineer. Leah stood at the head of the table. No PowerPoint, no sleek presentation, only printed circuit diagrams, photo evidence of tampered logs, encrypted timestamps, and the naked truth. Her voice was calm, steady, deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen, last night this building almost burned down. Not because of an accident, but as the direct result of system manipulation." She spread the documents across the table one by one. For the past 6 months, our energy management system was altered to report an 18% reduction in power consumption. Firmware was illegally updated. Data was falsified to inflate ESG metrics, to push through the merger. A silver-haired man at the far end of the table, Richard, the board chairman, interrupted, "Who's responsible?" Leah lifted her eyes, unwavering. "Ethan Hollis, Chief Financial Officer, and Omar Davis, M&A consultant. Both were taken into custody last night. The evidence is irrefutable." She paused, scanning the room. "We could hide this. Push the deal through. Secure $340 million. But when the independent auditors review, and they will, this company will collapse. Not just the merger, but our reputation, our license, and the livelihoods of 800 employees." No one spoke, only the faint hum of the air conditioner, cold as a verdict. The Cascade Holdings representative, a blonde woman named Catherine, leaned forward. "Dr. Mitchell, I appreciate your honesty. But you understand this means the merger will be suspended?" Leah nodded. "I understand. And I accept that you could lose the company you built from the ground up." "Maybe. But if it's built on deceit, then it doesn't deserve to exist. A heavy silence filled the room. Catherine studied Leah for a long moment, then smiled faintly. I've handled 17 mergers in my career. This is the first time I've seen a CEO destroy her own deal. For integrity. She rose from her chair, voice low and resolute. Cascade Holdings values honest partners more than wealthy ones. We'll pause the merger, yes, but we'll return once your house is clean. Because we want to work with someone who has a spine. Leah exhaled, a soft, trembling breath. Not relief that the deal survived, but that for once doing the right thing didn't come with punishment. Richard tapped his pen lightly against the table, breaking the silence. Dr. Mitchell, he said, who was the first to uncover the fraud? Leah turned. In the corner stood Malcolm Porter, wearing his navy blue janitor uniform, holding his worn wool cap, eyes calm and steady. Malcolm Porter, Leah said. Night janitor. Former aircraft technician, every head turned toward him. Malcolm said nothing. He just stood there, back straight, eyes clear. Mr. Porter has worked here for 3 years, Leah continued. Never missed a shift, never complained. He's the one who sees every corner of this building, the things we never notice. When I asked for a report, he brought me the truth, even though he knew it could destroy the merger and cost him his job. Her voice softened, warm and sincere. He saved this company, not by hiding the problem, but by daring to expose it. Richard nodded slowly. Mr. Porter, step forward. Malcolm hesitated for a moment, then walked to the center. You were an aircraft technician? Richard asked. Yes, sir. Then why are you working this job now? Malcolm drew a quiet breath. Because I needed the night shift, so I could be home with my daughter during the day, after my wife passed. The room fell completely silent. Richard looked at him for a long time, then said, From this day forward, you are Systems Safety Engineer of Aspen Ridge. $75,000 a year, flexible hours, your job, rebuild the entire safety network, and make sure this never happens again. Malcolm froze. Sir, I don't have a certification. Richard smiled. You have something more important than a certificate. You have a conscience. The meeting ended. Leah and Malcolm stood side by side at the glass wall of the 42nd floor, gazing at the Rocky Mountains glittering under the morning sun. You saved my life last night, Leah said softly. Malcolm's voice was low, steady, warm. You saved mine, Doctor. You believed in me when no one else would. They stood in silence for a while. Then Leah whispered, almost to herself, I lost my mother 7 years ago. I was 90 minutes late. Because of a meeting, Malcolm turned toward her, his expression gentle. Since then, Leah went on, I've been terrified of losing control. I thought if I worked hard enough, planned perfectly enough, I could stop loss from happening. But I can't. Malcolm nodded, his own voice trembling slightly. Same here. I was 1 minute late. My wife died because the smoke alarm failed. I was supposed to replace the battery 2 weeks earlier. $2.99. Leah looked at him, eyes glistening. 90 minutes. 1 minute. Doesn't really make a difference, does it? We were both too late. Malcolm nodded. Yes, but this time, we weren't. Not for someone else. Leah laughed softly through her tears. The first real smile she'd shown in years. The tears that followed were warm, like melting snow. Malcolm said nothing more. He simply stood beside her, silent, present. Because sometimes, having someone there is already enough to save you. 3 months later. The grand lobby of Aspen Ridge looked nothing like it once did. No longer just glass and steel, cold and impersonal. Now, the entire east wall had been transformed into a small exhibit. Light in the Dark. Paintings by Zoe Porter, age 8. 20 paintings in total. Snow-capped mountains, sunrises cutting through clouds, and tiny golden lights shimmering in the night. And among them, one painting made everyone stop. An electrical control panel with a small red warning light, the very light that had once exposed the truth. Its title, What My Dad Didn't See, But I Did. Next to it, a gleaming brass plaque read, The Vivian Porter Safety Foundation, providing free smoke alarms, CO detectors, and safety inspections for low-income families across the Denver area. Funded by Dr. Leah Mitchell and the Aspen Ridge community. Because no one should lose a loved one to a broken safety device. At the exhibit's opening, more than 200 people attended. Employees, clients, journalists, and families who had been helped. In the crowd, Zoe wore a new blue dress, her small hand in her father's, her smile radiant. Malcolm stood beside her in his first-ever gray suit, watching his daughter's paintings with a pride words couldn't capture. Leah approached, her phone switched off. No emails, no urgent calls, just presence. "Your paintings are beautiful, Zoe," she said softly, kneeling to meet the girl's eyes. "Thank you, ma'am." "Do you like the red light one?" "That's my favorite," Leah smiled, "because it reminds me that sometimes the most important things are the smallest ones." Zoe nodded solemnly, like an old soul. "My mom said that too. She said, it's the little things that save people." Leah swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "Your mom was a very wise woman," she whispered. That evening, after the exhibition, Malcolm invited Leah over for dinner. Not to a fancy restaurant, but to his small two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, where he and Zoe had lived since the fire. Dinner was simple: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, salad. Zoe talked about school. Malcolm laughed, a sound he had almost forgotten how to make. And Leah, who used to eat takeout alone among piles of paperwork, now sat at a small wooden table that felt warmer than any five-star dining hall. Midway through the meal, Zoe asked innocently, "Doctor, do you miss your mom?" Malcolm froze. "Zoe, sweetheart." Leah raised a hand gently. "It's okay." She looked at Zoe and smiled wistfully. "I miss her every single day." Zoe nodded thoughtfully. "My dad misses my mom too, but he says, missing someone doesn't mean you're sad. It means you love them." Leah turned to look at Malcolm. He gave a small shrug, half embarrassed, half sincere. And in that moment, Leah understood. Grief doesn't disappear. It changes shape, from burden to legacy, from regret to promise. That night, as Leah prepared to leave, Malcolm walked her to the door. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, pure, peaceful. "Mr. Porter," Leah said, smiling gently, "thank you. Not just for saving the company, but for reminding me of something I'd forgotten." "What's that?" "That being present matters more than being perfect. That trust can't be bought with power, only built with honesty. And that," her voice caught slightly, "that I'm not alone." Malcolm looked at her, his voice low and warm. "You're not. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You believed in me, even when I was just the janitor." Leah shook her head with a soft smile. "You were never just the janitor, Malcolm. You're the one who kept what was left of us safe." They stood there in the falling snow. Two people once strangers, now bound not by blood, but by shared loss, kept promises and presence when it mattered most. Malcolm spoke quietly. My daughter has a school concert next week. If you'd like to come, Leah interrupted, smiling through the snowlight. I'll be there. And this time, I'll be on time. Trust isn't given. It's built. Choice by choice. Promise by promise. Moment by moment when you decide to stay instead of walk away. A janitor and a CEO. Two worlds divided by class and power, yet connected by principles, by loss, by a shared vow. No one should be left alone again. They're still learning. They always will be. But that snowy Denver night, beneath the office lights and a child's laughter, they found something money could never buy. A chosen family. A truth protected. And the quiet belief that sometimes a single old coat and a whispered promise are enough to change everything. Dear friend, if you've stayed until now, perhaps you feel what I feel too. That sometimes the smallest people make the biggest difference. Malcolm wasn't a hero. Leah wasn't a saint. They were just two flawed, frightened, grieving souls who chose to stand still, face the darkness, and do what was right. And maybe, so can we. We don't need perfection to deserve a second chance. Just a little more courage, a little more kindness, and the decision to show up for those who matter most. If today's story touched you, leave a comment below. Tell me what made you believe in goodness again. Or simply write, I'm here. And I understand who knows. Your words might be the small light someone lost in the dark needs tonight. Don't forget to subscribe to True Tale Time, where each week we share new stories of betrayal, redemption, and the quiet strength of the human heart. See you in the next story. And remember, sometimes light doesn't come from the sun, but from a single small lamp glowing in the dark.